I heard a CEO speak this week earlier, an older white gentleman CEO talking about hustle and grind and talking about getting up at 4:30 in the morning, being in the office at 6:30 and having a 45-year marriage. And I thought, you know, I I have a feeling he has no idea the privilege that came along with achieving all of that. And what saddened me is he's expecting the same. He's expecting the same hustle and grind still today. What was really heartening in the CEO conversation was that there were two women CEOs, and one of them in particular had talked about weaving in personal priorities into the work day, the exercise on figuring out what's important to you, because she recognized that if you can be in alignment with somebody's personal priorities, then everything starts to flow. You're listening to episode 50 of the Happy Space podcast, a solo episode with me, your host, Clare Kumar, all around the theme of being a conduit for compassion. I'll be sharing highlights from Brené Brown at WorkHuman 2024, explaining the benefits of Happy Space Total Teamwork, and why I've taken on a new role as the Canadian Regional Director at the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Program. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Clare Kumar, your proudly neuroatypical host, exploring the intersection of productivity and inclusivity. I believe that everyone ought to be able to make their richest contribution, but too often people are excluded from spaces, cultures, and experiences. We can do better. I hope that you find inspiration and encouragement in these conversations, for everyone deserves a happy space. Hello, Happy Space friends. It's time for a solo episode again. I don't do these frequently, but it really feels like the right time. This is episode 50 of the Happy Space podcast. And I first of all want to just thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you've had an opportunity to listen to episodes beforehand. If not, and this is your first, great place to start, because I'm going to bring you up to speed on everything that's happened in the evolution of the podcast. And today I have a few things in particular to share. One is a little bit of a summary of the WorkHuman conference and listening, almost having a front row seat to Brené Brown drop incredible thinking for us, especially as she explored AI. And it's how important it is and the role of HR with HI. So that's coming up on this podcast. As well, I'll give you a little bit of an idea about the Total Teamwork Program, which I had the very first test run or pilot of in Long Beach, California in April, and it went well. So I'll give you a little idea about what that is. And I also want to talk to you about my new job, my new role that I've taken on. Everything is in line with me recognizing that my big mission and purpose in life is to be a conduit for compassion. This is explains why I've taken and added a job to my very full plate as an entrepreneur already, because there's such an opportunity here to be that conduit of compassion. It's really interesting. I looked at Judy Carter's The Message of You, her book many years ago when I was formulating my speaking career and stepping into that and looking for this through line of what I was about. And it was very largely advocacy, speaking up for social justice, speaking up for the improvement of conditions when I noticed it would benefit others around me, being compelled to do so, no matter the level of authority around me. If I see an opportunity that's going to improve life and well-being for others, I'm there. And so it's taken all this time to come clear to me, but I'll tell you what made it really, really clear. And if you've been listening to the podcast recently, you'll know I had a few episodes talking about autism, and in particular, late diagnosis in women. And so I spoke to two women who are really outstanding to me and in the world in this topic. The first was Melanie Diesel, and we talk about her late diagnosis. And if you watch that YouTube video, you will see my face go through all kinds of ahas in our conversation, because as Melanie was relaying her experience, light bulbs were going off for me. I was identifying with many of the things that she said. I was subsequently had lined up Ludmila Praslova, who's written a fairly new book called The Canary Code, all about neurodiversity at work. And Ludmila herself was diagnosed late with autism. All of this put me on my own path from March into April to proceed to look for a diagnosis. And I was successful in that venture. And I talk about that a little bit if you've been following Happy Space Hot Topics. It's a separate playlist in YouTube. And I had a lovely turnout, and Robbie Samuels hosted our conversation so that I could really worry about a little bit less than that, managing the room. He's so beautiful at what he does. And we had Melanie joined, and also Deborah joined, and she's also late dying. She's late to the neurodivergent community and doesn't disclose diagnosis, but is very much part of this community. And I respect her desire not to share if she doesn't want to. So much to talk about and unpack in that. And I hope you have a listen to some of the other episodes where we talk about the language of neurodiversity and so much more in the last set of episodes for sure. But what I wanted to point out is that in exploring my own diagnosis of autism, it was my conversation with Ludmila who helped me actually recognize that speaking up directly, I've always known is something that I do, and that can be a trait of autism, just bluntness, feeling like it's just, this is fact, so why wouldn't I say it straight up? I'm a little bit direct for sure. But this speaking up for social justice, I had no idea that that was also a trait that lies within autism. And so connecting the dots there is really fascinating. If you listen to my interview with Stephen Shedletsky, when I talked to him about his book, Speak Up Culture, I asked him in our conversations, did he have a sense about temperament or personality? Was there a kind of a clue to who are the people that were going to speak up? And I recently could go back to him and let him know that autism is one of the beauties in autism is that that is something that shows up. So another lens to look at speaking up through, and that was enlightening for him as well. A fabulous conversation with Stephen. Definitely check out that episode. But I want to move forward now. And first of all, I'm going to tell you about my new job. And this is why I have a sunflower here on my desk. I just picked these up today in the store, and I have a few behind me. They're gorgeous. The reason I'm showing a sunflower is I'm very proud to be the regional director for Canada for the Hidden Disabilities Sunflower Program. And if you've seen a sunflower lanyard that looks like this, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see that I'm holding up a lanyard that's green with sunflowers on it, and a card here which says Hidden Disabilities on it and has sunflowers. There's a spot on the back of the card for my name, family or guardian contact, and phone number, and any special assistance needs. And so this sunflower program, which is a global program and started in the UK, is a program with the sole goal of helping those with invisible, hidden, non-apparent challenges, conditions, or chronic illnesses to live a little bit more better, not more better, a little more comfortably or better every day. And so what's beautiful about this program is it's huge in the UK. It's in countries all over the world. And it's in airports already in Canada. Air Canada is a member, Metrolinx is a member, and there are new companies coming on board all the time. I am proud to be stepping into the role to look after these companies. And so this theme of conduit for compassion, it was so easy for me to say yes to this opportunity because this program, if you're wearing a lanyard, so companies will join, become members of the program and receive training for their employees. And those employees will then know that if they see somebody wearing this lanyard, let's say you're traveling and you're going to Pearson Airport and you're going to get on an Air Canada flight, if you're wearing this, the staff should know and recognize that you might need assistance. And all it's meant to do is spark that conversation. It's to spark that conversation. You might recognize employees that have been trained if they're wearing this white version of the lanyard and carrying the white card. You might also see bracelets, green for a wearer, white for a supporter, and also these pins. So the icon is very, very simple. It's a yellow sunflower green background, green for wearers, and white for supporters. And if you're checking the YouTube video, I'm showing all of these things so you'll see them. But they're quite easy to recognize. It's wonderfully consistent branding all over the world. And it's just a choice that an individual can make in a situation where they might feel like support would help them be more successful navigating their day. I am, like I said, very, very proud and excited to be bringing so many organizations on. I am amazed. I just started just over a week ago, and the number of organizations that are expressing interest is blowing my mind. High caliber organizations, entertainment venues, banks. We're going to see this be rolling out in Canada to a place near you. So please check out and select Canada, and you'll be able to see what's happening in Canada. If you're not in Canada and you're listening, as many of my listeners are not, there are pages for different countries, and you can plan your route traveling, for example, and find out where sunflower recognizing locations are. So I just wanted to share that with you because it's something I'll be spending quite a bit of time on, along with my other projects. And so as a conduit of compassion, I do want to share with you as well. Many of you know that I'm working on a book, and it's all about questions to the key questions you need to ask to invite great work. And that book is taking shape as we speak. I've been working on it for well over a year in figuring out the flow and what the real content is. I'm just starting to write it this summer, which is very exciting. But the crux of it is in the first part of the book starts with self-inquiry. And the self-inquiry is made available to everyone at no charge right now. And it's called the Happy Space Work Style Profile. If you go to clarekumar.com right now, you will see on my homepage a button to click on to get right to the work style profile. And it's also under Happy Space, where you find all the free stuff related to Happy Space, the movement that looks at the intersection of productivity and inclusivity, where everyone can get things done. So just a quick recap for you around the work style profile. It's my invitation to you to have a tool which prompts you to think about the conditions that invite your best performance and answer a survey. I would budget 15 minutes for the survey, and then another important 15 minutes to complete the transfer of that survey, the synthesis of that survey into a one-page summary. And that is your Happy Space work style profile that you can put on your wall in front of you so to help you remember what's most important to you. It can also be something that you share with colleagues and the community with whom you work. If you're a student and you're doing group work, oh, by all means, this is a fabulous place to start. Any group of people working together, planning to work together, the goal is that you start to understand each other as humans with psychology and physiology that deserves respect. This is where my biology degree really now plays into what I'm doing. And you'll find in the work style profile, you are asked questions about your preferred chronicity, the time of day that you like to operate, your preferred processing style, communication media. You'll be asked about recognition preferences. And there's the most important part, I think, though, is there's a section where it's called Nuances Necessary. And this is where I really recognize that life is always changing. It's dynamic. Our situations are changing. And we need an opportunity to express what's important to us in our lives that will influence our work and that which we're comfortable sharing with others. Now, I know all about keeping things close to my chest and not wanting to disclose. This is by no means any kind of persuasion to say, share what's going on with you. But I will share that when I came to be able to share my MS, multiple sclerosis diagnosis, and the fact that I live with this condition only about 7 years ago, and I was diagnosed in 2014. So it's just a few years ago now. After 7 years living with the condition, I finally found words to be able to share it. And now I can share it freely. And I can tell you that in almost every conversation I share it, somebody I'm speaking with says, oh, that's my sister. Oh, that's me too. Oh, that's my brother-in-law. That's my nephew. It's so pervasive. And there is such value in sharing and such support to be found. And so I will just plant a seed that if there's something that you're living with that is difficult to carry alone, then there may be an opportunity to share it. And this nuance is necessary section is it has some questions for you that might prompt what you'd like to share. We don't need to share diagnoses at work. We don't need to. But what we want to do is translate them into what we need. And in most cases, that's requesting an accommodation. But in my work, what I'm trying to suggest to organizations is that we start thinking about how we make more inclusive and accessible environments so that accommodation won't be necessary. But until that day, I do want you to feel like you know what you need and you're comfortable to ask for it. There are some hot topics conversations on the challenges in speaking up and the value of labels and how all of this can help us feel like we belong. So I urge you to check out those on the Hot Topics playlist as well and really give some thought to what you'd like to share. Hey, Happy Space listeners, if you're looking to boost your team's performance, look no further. As a productivity expert and inclusivity advocate, I love showing leaders how inclusivity is the key ingredient in team performance. We travel beyond lip service and explore helping everyone truly bring their best selves to work. Ready to see your team soar? Visit clarekumar.com and book a discovery call today. Now, when I'm working with a leader and their team in the total teamwork program, it's a super concise program. I've taken it down to as little as possible to deliver an effective outcome. And the outcome is a leader and their team figuring out how they're going to work with each other when they need to come together. What's that going to look like? Return to office mandates are really driving people into places of resentment and planning to leave and disengagement. And instead, we could have conversations about, gosh, when do we actually need to work together? And once we understand who each other is, that's because the work style profile is part of this program, then we can have a conversation that says, oh my gosh, I understand what I'm asking for you to come in. Is there a way we can do this without that? Or when do we absolutely need it? And boy, am I going to be grateful for that effort. So the ultimate thinking is with this program, it is compassion infused compromise, where we're seeing each other for who we are and how we work best, and we're going to meet each other where we are. So if you know of an organization, I'm still looking for a few opportunities to use as case studies and infuse insight into the book. If you have an organization, by all means, drop me a line or a comment in social media, reach out to me. And you can find my contact information right on the website. Reach out to me and let me know and introduce me to an organization whose ear is to the ground already on knowing that they can invite the best performance out of everyone. And here's a practical way to do it. So I just wanted to plant that opportunity for you there, all again related to this conduit of compassion. Now, In April, part of my trip to LA in April was going to work with a client all about total teamwork, which was brilliant. And I also spoke at NAPO, and I gave the first presentation of Ask Already, which is the working title of the book I was just mentioning, all about those key conversations to invite great work. And that was really wonderful because I learned that the work style profile is valuable, just as valuable for entrepreneurs as it is for employees. And so if you are working with people as an entrepreneur, I collaborate with people all the time. Understanding how we like to work is even before I hire people to work with now, this is going to be part of the process because it's so critical to having effective discussions about getting the work done and to reducing a lot of friction. So it paves the way for a smooth outcome. Following all of that work in LA, I went to Austin and I went to the WorkHuman 2024 conference. And I want to share a few of the tidbits from this conference, from some of the amazing speakers that I saw there. I'll go through a few of them. We're talking about culture, we're talking about work-life integration, chief people officers and ERGs, DEI in the workplace. And I want to summarize some of the key thoughts, but I want to finish up this podcast by sharing what Brené Brown talked about when we were together. So stay tuned to the end because I'm going to finish with Brené. I know what a good thing is. And she's the reason I met a lot of people at the conference. They said for sure they were there because Brené was coming to speak. And it was remarkable. So let me tell you what I first went to. The opening session I went to was with a wonderful woman named Erin Meyer. And she's based in Paris now, but doesn't hail from there. She's written a book called The Culture Map. And she really laid down rapid fire, incredible insights about how different cultures interact and think about things. And she talked a lot about the importance of content and context in communication, and that some cultures do really well with low context, and other cultures really need a lot of context. She talked about things like the comfort with silence, that in the US, we're only comfortable with about 2.5 seconds of silence. I would imagine it's similar in Canada, maybe slightly longer. I would have to check that out. But in Korea, 7 to 9 seconds of silence is fine. Now, if I stop talking right now for 7 to 9 seconds, I think the majority of listeners out there would think that something had gone wrong and they'd click out and be somewhere else. But in some cultures, we have an appetite for stillness and processing. And really, really important to understand when you're working with other cultures. I also met Barbie Brewer, and she's got a storied, rich corporate experience, has evolved now and gave a talk called Live and Let Live. And I thought that was amazing. It was about work-life integration and her own journey towards it, and her invitation to human resources professionals to hold space for the conversations around what employees need. And you remember I was talking about hidden disabilities in the sunflower and asking people for what they need. My book, Ask Already, working title, is all going to be about conversations and connecting to what people need. So there's a real awareness and consciousness building around the fact that we need to get in touch with this. She also talked about it being a moral obligation to distribute opportunity. And I feel the same way. I really abhor the fact that we marginalize some people and really limit their ability to contribute into society. So we are so aligned on that. She invited us to build our asynchronous muscle. And I often talk about the fact that now we're seeing more people work remotely than before. People are now abstract as time always was. And we have things like, if you're seeing the YouTube, I have the clock behind me and I have a calendar on my screen. These tools help us make time less abstract Well, we need some tools to help make people less abstract and keep them top of mind. We might have had old cues when we were working, and we would go into a meeting and see people's faces in a room or see someone in a hallway and go, oh gosh, I owe you this, Abigail. And Mohammed, oh my gosh, I see you and I know I have to work on this for you. We have visual cues which have now been put in different places or potentially evaporated. And we need to figure out how we're going to build this muscle of working when we're not necessarily together. It requires different communication, and it requires more communication about the communication. And I think she said something like Slack is not communication. I mean, these text messages back and forth. My VA, Raphael, and if you've listened to any of my fishbowl sessions or Happy Space Hot Topics, you will have met Raphael. And we had a misunderstanding this morning where he was trying to be helpful and we were just completely missing each other. And so the first thing I did was, let's have a conversation about what just happened there, because I think you were trying to help me. And he's like, yeah, I was. And so stuff goes sideways. And if you don't have that conversation, you can really miss beauty in the workplace that's happening. So Slack, text, use that to confirm a meeting point. Was at this address, something like that. But anytime there's more heart in a message, take the time to use more words, emojis, and leave a voicemail or send a video message. I think that's going to be one of my biggest invitations to people working. From there, I had the privilege of seeing Vanice Hayes, who's the Chief of People, Culture, and Inclusion. She has 13 ERGs in her company. They're open to everyone. They are funded. But what's most important, I think, is they are led by executive sponsors. And then there are chapters all throughout different physical locations so that and parts of the organization so that there's a way to bring things together cohesively. What she did reveal was that the people that are participating in ERGs have an increased intent to stay and to provide referrals. So there's a huge amount of goodwill when there are ERGs or employee resource groups present. I think one of my concerns that sort of bubbled up to me when I was looking at ERGs, they are usually layered onto jobs. I don't know and how many roles somebody's scope has been diminished so that they can add the ERG in. And often we're dealing with groups that are already marginalized. So my hope is that there's reasonable compensation for the effort that's being put in there. If you run an ERG or are part of an ERG, I would love to know more, and maybe we'll be in conversation and maybe even do a podcast episode about it, because I'm really curious about how they're working and the great kind of efforts and outcomes that are happening. I would be remiss if I didn't shed a little love on Baratunde Rafiq Thurston, who first started his talk about how to citizen with a breakdown of his name, which is very, very unique. He gave us some invitations, first of all, to show up and participate, to understand power and its value and why people want it. There was a whole discussion on power, which was fascinating. But he invited us to commit to the collective. And there are collective cultures, predominantly, I would say, Asian and Eastern cultures, not North America, more individual than ever. And that's where we trip up when we stop thinking about the collective experience. And so his invitation, I thought was very, very on point. He encourages us to develop ourselves, each other, the planet, and our relationships. So this journey of self-development, I think, and this commitment to always be learning and grow is very powerful. You know, I heard a CEO speak this week earlier, an older white gentleman, CEO, talking about hustle and grind and talking about getting up at 4:30 in the morning, being in the office at 6:30 and having a 45-year marriage. And I thought, you know, I I have a feeling he has no idea the privilege that came along with achieving all of that. And what saddened me is he's expecting the same. He's expecting the same hustle and grind still today. What was really heartening in the CEO conversation was that there were two women CEOs, and one of them in particular had talked about, weaving in personal priorities into the work day, the exercise on figuring out what's important to you, because she recognized that if you can be in alignment with somebody's personal priorities, then everything starts to flow. When you have that tension between personal priorities and professional priorities, that kind of tension can fester and really ultimately lead to disengagement, and ultimately you leave. So brave on her part, and bold and forward thinking, and dinosaur thinking on the other part, and an opportunity, through conversation, hopefully before he retires, to perhaps think a little more differently. I know I planted a seed. I had to ask the question twice before it was answered, and I'm so glad they raised it the second time. It was interesting, right? Because the conversation started, and as soon as he mentioned hustle and grind, I asked a question about whether that was still relevant in today's workforce, given the millennial mindset and the fact that, there's a lot of people under stress. The question was not asked by the moderator, it was ignored. And we were lucky there weren't that many people on the call. So as we progressed, and a couple of the other leaders talked about vulnerability and expressing mental health challenges their family members had had, I thought, you know what, I have to raise the question again in light of the mental health challenges that we're talking about and we are well aware of exist in the workplace. Is it reasonable to still talk about hustle and grind? And that's when my question got raised to the floor, and basically, dismissed again by the one CEO, and then validated by the other CEO. So there's hope out there as we look at this. The last point that Baratunde shared was that emotions give us a pathway to a shared truth. And while emotions can derail us and be somewhat emotionally exhausting at times, they are such clues for us to attend to and invite reflection. Whenever there's a difficult challenge, there's an opportunity to learn something. And it takes some bravery to stop and say, what can I take from this, rather than, oh, why am I such a victim? So that's important. So that was Baratunde Rafiq Thurston, who was just brilliant. I want to move on to a DEI in the workplace panel. And if you've seen a blog post on clarekumar.com/blog, I posted after visiting SHRM 2023, SHRM Inclusion 2023 in October. I had hoped to travel to Savannah and be there in person, but because of COVID, my first COVID hit, I wasn't able to attend, but they did a fabulous job of virtual inclusion. And I'm really hoping that virtual continues to stay as part of what we're offering. I know some organizations are still doing that, and I applaud that double effort for inclusivity. But on that panel, you would have met Gloria Goins, and she was again at this WorkHuman event, and I bumped into her actually and a little fangirled on her as she was in a line, and talked to her. And then I attended her session, was able to ask some questions. She was presenting with Peter Danzig and Kamille Washington. Kamille is from WorkHuman itself. Peter works out of a hospital, and I will put all of their contact information in the show notes, so you can grab all of that there. But I just wanted to share a couple of things. So Gloria is someone, if you ever get a chance to hear her, she is so articulate and remarkable in her language, it stays with you. She said, your job is not to speak truth to power, it is to speak truth with power. And to remember that whenever there is progress, there is always backlash. Wherever there is progress, there is always backlash. And this is in particular in response to events in June 2023, where we saw some reversing of inclusivity and equity measures in the colleges and universities in the US. And that was the beginning of a turning on the DEI initiatives, and along with some recession, not recessionary, but slowing of the economy a little bit, pulling back. And that's the backlash she was talking about. And so when you know to expect that, it means you can continue your resolve and can stay hopeful. And she also offered up the fact that hope is not a spectator sport. Hope is not a spectator sport. So Gloria Goins, check her out if you get a chance to hear her speak. Make the time for it. You won't be sorry. Now, Peter Danzig, he's just an insightful gentleman, also articulate as well. He encouraged us to leave room for white fragility. Leave room for white fragility and to allow time for change. He was inviting patience, saying 2 to 3 years. Encourage leaders to recognize that people are not inventory and DEI is not dying. People are dying. So what a juxtaposition. Be patient, and at the same time, people are dying. So, it's that's where the urgency, that's where the fuel comes when you realize what the consequences of marginalizing people and continuing to be inhospitable and discriminate. It's the fuel to make change. It's the fuel to have the difficult conversations, to be the person in the room that speaks up in allyship for someone else. That's the big invitation here. And I think Peter was so articulate in making that. Now, Kamille Washington, as I said, she's in charge of DEI at WorkHuman. She really urged us to get data friendly and explore DEI with performance metrics. I think what I took away from an earlier episode with Katie Mooney of Saramount was that we have to measure, we have to measure, we have to not only measure, we have to embed DEI into the fiber of how we do everything. It's how, for example, when I hosted the NAPO podcast for 2 years, the first year we had DEI initiatives that were prescribed. We had specific podcast episodes speaking about them. And I said for year 2, when I was fully in charge of the editorial, I said, we're not going to do that. We're going to look for representation in our guests. We're going to make sure we're selecting guests with a variety of voices in mind. And I think if you look at NAPO Standout, you will see that the roster of guests is diverse and that we have a lot of topics. My commitment is the same to do that on the Happy Space podcast. You should see a variety of personality types, different ways of thinking, different skin colors, different identities of all kinds. It's aiming to be that place where anyone who wants to come on and have a worthwhile conversation will feel very, very comfortable. So that brings me now to want to just finish with some insights from Brené Brown. But before I do that, let me thank you again for listening to the Happy Space podcast. And I will make a request. If it's possible for you to drop a review, that helps others find the podcast. Better yet, if there's someone who's interested in a particular topic that I cover, whether it's design, whether it's leadership and culture change, whether it's building the self-efficacy and skills to be better self-regulated and better equipped out in this sometimes inhospitable world, if you see a podcast, please share it with someone, gift it to them as a, I love you and I thought you might be interested in this topic. So I would love if you could do that. You can always find the podcast at clarekumar.com/podcast. Okay, let's get to Brené. What I loved about it was she was immediately so relaxed. She's doing this because she believes in recognition, which is what WorkHuman is all about. And her big message was HR people out there, this is our time to make a difference. Now, AI was a huge focus. Eric, who runs WorkHuman, brilliant thinker and leader, his opening was all around AI. And he opened his line of questioning to Brené about AI as well. And her plea was, please, 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 HR people become conversant in the language of AI so that you can be in the conversation, because if AI develops without humanity being a huge concern in how it's built, we've already seen evidence of bias being baked in. When we need to have that be unlearned, and we need to bake in thoughtfulness and intention in the way it is rolled out. I just went to a bank event this morning, and they're trialing some branches without humans, and I told them very clearly, don't do that. Don't do that. We're seeing a devolution of our ability to connect because of the pandemic and because of forced social isolation. And if you take away the opportunities for social lubrication that are there, it makes us feel home. It makes us feel seen. And for many people whose day is spent around other people, that might not seem huge. But imagine the senior whose only contact was that grocery shopping trip. We have to think responsibly about the culture that we're creating and the humanity that lies within it. These are my thoughts. These are not Brené's. I just felt like riffing on that point here. Um, she shared Harvard's Linda Hill's comment that saying that the hardest thing about technology is people. And I think if we can make sure that human resources has their voice at the table, we'll be a lot better off. Esther Perel, she said, referred to AI as artificial intimacy. And I think she's leaning into this thought that we have the concept of counterfeit connection. And she said what she learned from Esther is that it's easier to fake closeness than it is to be close. It's easier to fake closeness than it is to be close. And I thought, yeah, because then we have to be a little bit vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to uncomfortable. And I think I saw a study this week that said 78% of employees run away from awkward or uncomfortable conversations. 52% of toxic people or toxic situations will just be completely avoided. This doesn't solve anything. So we have to be able to find our voices. Eric mentioned the epidemic of loneliness, and then Brené asked attendees how she thought people are doing right now. And she looked at faces in the room, like below the glare of the stage lights. And she was like, wow, she's seeing that we are disconnected, dysregulated, and distrusting. And I think she's on point. I'm seeing all of that now. And we're in sort of self-protection mode, sometimes too quick to go to self-defense before asking questions. She said we may be too beat down to rise to the AI challenge. So it's an invitation to build some space and permission to dive into this space. It's a request actually from her to be able to do this if you're able to. I love that she demonstrated her boundary setting by telling people in the audience to put their phones away, as she was not going to give permission to be video recorded. And one of my favorite quotes I use in a lot of my coaching conversations is that she says the most compassionate people are indeed the most boundaried people. Those who are willing to set boundaries avoid stepping into resentment. So Brené did that in fine fashion. I did audio record the presentation from my own notes. I will not share that recording, but it did help me make this really good recap for you. So I hope you appreciate that. She said that Brené said that she's extremely introverted and is a terrible public person. And she was sort of questioning, gosh, would she have, knowing what's happened to her now that she's spotted and recognized, would she have done that TED Talk? Would she have done the same things that she, this path to being well known and having terrific influence? It's been very difficult for her. She says, I do love humanity. I'm not crazy about people in general. I do love humanity. I'm not crazy about people in general. And that made me think of my friend Scott Stratton, who wrote Unmarketing and Unselling, I think, and this QR code kills kittens. He's a brilliant mind. And a fabulous orator and insightful, humorous speaker. And if you get a chance to hear Scott, look up his rants on YouTube. He has the same. He was in HR too, and he's like, I'm not sure I really love people. So, pardon me. I think it's interesting to look at the people who go into these professions, but maybe are not designed to be surrounded by them to the extent that they can be. Couple of last thoughts before I wrap up. The number one shame trigger at work is not failure. It's irrelevance. The number one shame trigger at work is not failure. It's irrelevance. And so as you see people, we're seeing a little bit of return to office mandates as sort of a forced attrition. We're going to change, go back to the conditions we can by law mandate. And if you don't like it, you'll leave. But taking someone's purpose away and making them feel irrelevant is also a way to invite them to leave because it's horrific. And it's a really embarrassing thing. I remember when I lived in Japan, if a salaryman, but in Japanese you would say sarariman, had lost his job, often they would get dressed up every day and leave as if they were going to work and maybe just go to a park and hang out or something, but they would keep the charade up to not be, so blatantly public about not having a job. Shame is a powerful motivator. Another thought for you oh, this is what I love. She's exploring things that she values. And so she's, in addition to humility, curiosity, and a learning mindset, Brené celebrated something called grounded confidence. It's an attribute she's researching right now along with mental toughness and this sense of grounded confidence. So grounded, to me, what I think she's getting at here is that it's a very sure-footedness. The amygdala is not hijacking this thinking. They're unflappable and they're very sure and steady about what they know what they do. You add in humility and curiosity, you can stay grounded and still be learning. And I thought this is really interesting. I'm so excited to see what she comes up with. And the last thing I have to say is that she relayed a story about hiring a team member and being warned that in the interview process, she was told, watch out, this candidate is going to pull out a notebook and she's going to ask you 400 questions. And the hiring team thought Brené would be like, oh God, that's too exhausting. But instead, Brené said, hired. Absolutely. She wants that kind of curiosity. And did I ever warm to that? Because I could be that girl. I've got all the questions. It's part of why I love hosting a podcast and asking the questions. It's part of why I'm writing a book on questions with the overall goal of being this conduit for compassion. So I want to thank you again for joining me today. We talked about Hidden Disability Sunflower. We talked about the Total Teamwork Program and the work style profile. And we finished off with a celebration of the WorkHuman conference. It comes around every year. And if you're an HR professional or a leader wanting to better manage their team, boy, there was gem after gem. The hard part about the WorkHuman conference, the hard part was choosing what to go to because nothing's recorded. So there was serious FOMO for a lot of the events. But as you can hear from what I attended, super, super rewarding, rich content. And I would urge you to put this in your calendar if this is something that you're looking to do. Thanks again for joining me. Don't forget to drop a review and share this podcast with someone who else might benefit. Thanks so much. And I look forward to you tuning into the next episode. Take care. Thanks so much for spending time here. Check out happyspacepod.com for links to all the episodes, including on YouTube, our online community, and helpful tools for work that fits. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on social media, or even better, drop a review. And please share with someone else who you know also deserves a happy space.